on, Sally then starts our recording of our service. A beautiful picture that Sally found of an eagle. We acknowledge with deep gratitude that we are on the territory of the Shuswap and Ktunaxa nations and the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respect to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. So I invite us to come to the present moment. An easy way is to come to our senses, be aware of what we're seeing, and be aware of anything we're hearing. Be aware of the silence that's always underneath any sound, listening for the silence. Whenever we listen for silence, our mind becomes still and we are present. We can become aware of anything we're feeling. We can feel both outside on our skin, but we can also feel the inside, any energy. And then, of course, we can feel that the life that's in our bodies. Often it's easiest to feel it when it's in our hands. It's like feeling our hands from the inside. And then, of course, anything that we smell, be aware of that. And anything that we taste, be aware of that. Life is not in our heads. Life is in the present moment. And if we don't come to the present moment, we might miss life. And then we might miss the sacredness of life, the godness of life. So how important it is for us to keep coming back to the present moment. I'll invite Carolyn and Greg to lead us in our first song this morning, Each Blade of Grass.
Okay. Each blade of grass, every wing that soars, the waves that sweep across a distant shore, may pull the circle of God. Each lambing child, every gentle eye, a forest lit beneath a moon-bright sky, may pull the circle of God. Each silent paw, every rounded stone, the buzz that echoes from a honeycomb, may pull the circle of God. Each vibrant soar, every outstretched hand, the wind that leaps and sails across the land, may pull the circle of God. Each icy peak, every patterned shell, the joyous chorus that the dawn foretells, may pull the circle of God. Each cosmic hue, every creature's way, upon the beauty of this vast array, may pull the circle of God. Oh, Brent, you guys are muted still. Hang on. Start again.
Hey, Brad.
Hi, Benny.
I think no one heard me when I said you're going to read that book for me.
That's right. Good thing Carolyn is on the ball.
She's a good trying to listener. And I'll just sit back and watch you read the book.
This is the book, yeah, that we're going to read today. Thanks, Benny.
Who wrote it?
Eckhart Tolle and he wrote the text, and Patrick McDonnell
Ah,
did the pictures in the cartoons.
okay. Well, I'm gonna enjoy it, I bet.
You bet. I'm going to start it right now.
Uh-huh.
And so good to see you anyway. Yeah,
Yeah, thanks.
waiting for this to
Oh,
start.
there we go.
So there's
Go over
the
here, bye.
title. Okay, Benny. Guardians of Being is the name of the book, Spiritual Teachings from Our Dogs and Cats. And it fits the theme of today. So pictures and words. True happiness is found in simple, seemingly unremarkable things. But be aware of little quiet things. You need to be quiet inside. A high degree of alertness is required. Be still, look, listen, be present. Bring awareness to the many subtle sounds of nature. The rustling of leaves in the wind, raindrops falling, the humming of an insect, the first bird song at dawn. Give yourself completely to the act of listening. Beyond the sounds, there is something greater, a sacredness that cannot be understood through thought. It's beautiful, the dog looking at the star. Look at a tree, a flower, a plant. Let your awareness rest upon it. How still it is, how deeply rooted in being. Allow nature to teach you stillness. Everything natural, every flower, tree, and animal has important lessons to teach us if we only stop, look, and listen. So in the drawings, it says reflect, just float, keep a song in your heart, smell the roses, be hoppy, find your own pace. I should be taking notes. Just watching an animal closely can take you out of your mind and bring you into the present moment, which is where the animal lives all the time, surrendered to life. It's so wonderful to watch an animal because an animal has no opinion about itself. It is. That's why the dog is so joyful and why the cat purrs. When you pet a dog or listen to a cat purring, thinking may subside for a moment and a space of stillness arises within you, a doorway into being. So you see the woman looking at the cat sleeping so peacefully on the bed. So then the woman lies next to the cat, and then the man is looking, and now the man lies next to the woman who lies next to the cat. The vital function that pets fulfill in this world hasn't been fully recognized. They keep millions of people sane. They have become guardians of being. Most of us live in a world of mental abstraction, conceptualization, and image making, a world of thought. We are impressed. Okay, thank you. We are immersed in a continuous stream of mental noise. It seems that we can't stop thinking. So I'll just read the cartoon. I was thinking of all my problems. I was thinking of all the pain of the past. And I was thinking of all the uncertainty of the future. And I was thinking, poor, poor me, my sad life. And then I was thinking how little time there is. And I'm really thinking it's all just hopeless. What can I do? And the dog says, stop thinking. Just as the dog loves to chew bones, the human mind loves problems. We get lost in doing, thinking, remembering, anticipating, lost in a maze of complexity and a world of problems. Nature can show us the way home, the way out of the prison of our own minds. The dog star, the brightest star in all the heavens, always there to show me the way, also known as Sirius or my Earl. The dog shows the way. Close your eyes and say to yourself, I wonder what my next thought is going to be. Then become as alert as a cat watching a mouse hole. You may find that as long as you are absolutely alert, the next thought does not arise. So waiting for the mouse, waiting for the mouse. And you can see the mouse has come out and is looking at the cat. Millions of people who otherwise would be completely lost in their minds and in endless past and future concerns are taken back by their dog or cat into the present moment again and again and reminded of the joy of being. We have forgotten what rocks, plants, and animals still know. We have forgotten how to be still, to be ourselves, to be where life is, here and now. What's on my to-do list today? Just be, buzz. The dog's is in the now, so it can teach you or remind you. So anyway, the secret of life is to always live in the moment, to live in the now. Now, the last now or the next now. Now, oh, like now, just like it. Oh, look at me, I'm living in the now, me right here, right now. No future, no past, just now, now, now. Okay, what next? Or now what? Yeah, oops, now what? Be alert as you watch a dog at play or at rest. Right? Let the animal teach you to feel at home in the now, to celebrate life by being completely present. The dog is still in the natural state, and you can easily see that because you have problems and your dog doesn't. And while your happy moments may be rare, your dog celebrates life continuously. Earl, it is so nice to get away from it all, I guess, although I don't have that much of an all to get away from. You just watch the tail. With some dogs, you just look at them. Just a little look is enough, and their tail goes, life is good, life is good. And they are not telling themselves a story of why life is good. It's a direct realization. The human says, I love myself or I hate myself. The dog says, woof, woof, which translated means, I am myself. I call that integrity, being one with yourself. The dog has no self-image, good or bad, so he has no need to play roles, nor does he love himself or hate himself. He has no self. How to live free of the burden of self. What a great spiritual teaching. Eat, walk, play, nap. I'm a simple dog. The key to transformation is to make friends with this moment. What form it takes doesn't matter. Say yes to it, allow it, be with it. Oh, that was the dog's teaching. I'm just translating it into words. Gee, what time is it? Now. Dogs always know what time it is. So you think we should go for a walk? Arf. Okay. Allow your dog to take you for a walk every day. It's good for the body and it's good for the soul. You're full of good ideas, aren't you, Earl? Arf. Dogs emanate a goodness that people respond to. One of the joys of walking your dog is that often people come up to you immediately. Their hearts open. They are not interested in you, of course. They want to pat your dog. Dogs offer precious opportunity, even to people who are trapped in their egos, of loving and being loved unconditionally. They have been with humans for thousands of years, and now there is a link between dogs and humans, much closer than it has ever been. I like this. The dog says, I'm never off leash with my Uzi. And the dog is running. Our hearts are connected. And I often felt that with our dog. Anyway, there was an invisible leash between us. Nature will teach you to be still. If you don't impose it on it, a stream of thoughts, a very deep meeting takes place when you perceive nature in that way without naming things. Sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes, and the grass grows by itself. When you don't cover up the world with words and labels, a sense of the miraculous returns to your life that was lost a long time ago when humanity, instead of using thought, became possessed by thought. A depth returns to your life. Things regain their newness, their freshness. Tweet, 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 go the birds, clap, 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 go the rest of the animals. What is it that so many people find enchanting? What is it that so many people find enchanting in animals? Their essence, their being, is not covered up by the mind. That's good. As it is in most humans. And whenever you feel that essence in another, you also feel it in yourself. Every being is a spark of the divine or God. Look into the eyes of the dog and sense that innermost core. When you are present, you can sense the spirit, the one consciousness in every creature, and love it as yourself. Love is a deep empathy with the other's beingness. You recognize yourself, your essence, in the other. And so you can no longer inflict suffering on the other. I like the cartoon, pat, 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 and then the dog pats, I guess, the cat, and the cat pats the bird, and the bird pats the worm, and the worm says to another worm, the world has changed. You are not separate from the whole. You are one with the sun, the earth, the air. You don't have a life, you are life. Woofy loves, or woves, the tweez, the walks, the grass, the dirt, the bugs, the sky, the birds, the air. Okay, let's all go for a spin. And they see the heart and the love radiating out of the earth. The one life, the one consciousness takes on the form of a man or woman, a blade of grass, a dog, a planet, a sun, a galaxy. This is the play of forms, the dance of life. We are ultimately not separate, not from one another, and not from any living thing, the flower, the tree, the cat, the dog. You can sense yourself in them, the essence of who you are. You could say God. There is a term, a Christian term, which is beautiful. Loving the Creator in the creature. And that is the end of the story.
Wow, thanks, Brent. I enjoyed that. Do you think bears are guardians of being?
Absolutely. Bears are very much guardians of being. They know how to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I want to go read that book again later today.
Yeah, you bet, Benny.
Yeah. Do we
Nice
get
to
to
see you.
sing now?
We get to sing now. I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn and Greg.
Oh, I like this song.
All right, thanks, Benny. See you.
God of the sparrow, God of the whale, God of the swirling stars, how does a creature say love? How does a creature say praise? God of the earthquake, God of the storm, God of the trumpet blast, how does a creature cry, oh? How does a creature
God near at hand, God of the loving heart. How do you children say joy? How do you children say home?
Thanks, Carolyn and Greg. And Judy Ray is going to read our scripture today. Good morning, Judy.
Good morning. The first reading is Genesis 25. In some way, we are reading the creation stories of the Jewish people and the Jewish tribes. Today about the Israelites from Jacob and the Edomites from Esau. Dissension, strife, and struggle begin in utero and continue in lived experience. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Paddan Aram, sister of Laban, the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her, and she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger." When her time to give birth was at hand, there was twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle, so they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field, and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I'm famished." Therefore, he was called Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." Esau said, "I'm about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank, and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Second reading is from Romans. Paul believes that sin inhibits people from faithful service, yet in the following passage, he instructs the Roman Church about the mighty power of God's Spirit, which liberates all people to become children of God. God grants us a spirit of adoption, a spirit transplant, and we become heirs to God's promises. We hear of how all creation is waiting and groaning for people to have this spirit transplant, to be enlightened and conscious. So then, brothers and sisters, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received a spirit of adoption. When we cry, "Abba, Father," it is that very Spirit bearing witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. If in fact we suffer with him, so that we may also be glorified with him. I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now, and not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in hope we were saved. Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what is seen? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. The Gospel reading from Matthew. Many biblical stories are about abundance. Here in the parable of the sower, the very act of sowing is in what some might say a reckless fashion. Letting seeds fall where they may hints at the generosity and abundance of God's grace. The differing soils in the parable imply results cannot be guaranteed when spiritual wisdom is shared. Why? Positively, God will bring the growth. Negatively, some will not respond. Life with God always remains invitation, not imposition. What the parable invites is our openness to a life rooted in God in being. The parable recognizes the complexity that not all respond in the same ways. Different life experiences open people and close people to deepening in the spiritual dimension. Even different times in the same individual's life make one more available to or skeptical of the life of faith. Mystery exists in the gulf between hearing the offer of grace and the acceptance of it. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such great crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parable, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil. They sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen, probably added by the writer of Matthew. Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart. This is what was sown on the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root, but endures only for a while. And when trouble or persecution arises on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. As for what was sown among thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth choke the word, and it yields nothing. But as for what was sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields, in one case 100-fold, in another 60, in another 30. May we hear sacred wisdom through these human texts. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Thank you for your reading, Judy. So just wanted to reiterate this line. I don't know if I can show it to you. Creation is waiting with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. That's the way it's worded in the New Revised Standard Version. And then another translation is creation is waiting with eager longing for humans to become enlightened. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. Um, Paul's been, last few weeks we've been reading Paul's letter to the Romans, and Paul's been emphasizing the importance of what it means to live by grace and faith and spirit. And it actually is pretty significant. He contrasts it between living by external laws. And kind of a basic message that he has is if we're living by the Spirit and we're rooted in faith and grace, we don't need external laws. And I remember a man saying to me one time, the way he put it is, some people think grace is when you're going, when the speed limit says 100 kilometers an hour and you're doing 125, and a police person pulls you over, that they should give you a ticket, but if they're graceful to you, they'll let you off. And he says, that's not what it is. Grace is, you don't need a speed limit saying to drive 100 kilometers an hour because you know inside what's a safe speed to travel. And you live your life in a right way, in a thoughtful, healthy way, not because of anybody outside telling you how you should live, but because you just know inside how to be, how to live. So I hope I say this correctly, but even with movements that try to help people, like with Black Lives Matter, people who are rooted in a deeper place, know to search out themselves for ways in which we have our own prejudices and smallness of thinking and fear and privilege. And we try to treat people equitably and with dignity and respect. And it comes from within. It happens because of where we're rooted. And then Paul brings it in some ways to today's passage in Romans, and that's like what I'd like to focus on today. When he actually says that all of creation has been waiting with eager longing for people to get this, for people to live by God's Spirit, to people to grow up and live in a more enlightened, or live in an enlightened way, in a conscious way. And then he goes on and talks about, it's like all creation has been groaning in labor pains, waiting for humans to adopt the Spirit of God. And I just find that so beautiful. Like the creation is waiting with eager longing and groaning in labor pains for humans to grow up, for humans to be who God has created us to be. It's wonderful. And if we ask the question, so why are we seeking to be spiritual? Why do we come to church? Why do we try and be a part of this Christian enterprise or any religious or spiritual enterprise? It's so we can become more enlightened, become more conscious. We can have the Spirit of God, and it matters. All creation is on our side. All creation is groaning, waiting for humans to get there. It's not just about us. It's about the planet we live on. It's about all the creatures we live with. That all creation cares about this. And there's a relationship between humans and creation. It reminds me of that line in addiction systems, family systems, that when someone's not healthy, when someone has an addiction, it's not just their problem, it becomes a family problem. It's a family sickness, it's a family disease. And when people become healthy, it affects the whole family. Everybody in the family gets better when somebody gets better, because we live in relationship and in connection. And that's true in the family of life. When people are sick, and they're operating at a lower level of consciousness, the world pays the cost. Animals pay the cost. Vegetation pays the cost. Creation pays the cost. Creation is waiting in eager longing for humans to become more conscious, more enlightened. And it's helpful that the relationship between our level of consciousness and our impact in life, the way we live our life, is a direct relationship to what level of consciousness we are. And I see if I can just unpackage that in a way that's helpful. There's a line that says, no one can act beyond their level of consciousness. You know, and this morning I thought of a little example, but I used to coach volleyball, and at one time I'm coaching junior high boys. And I remember realizing, it was a bit of a struggle to realize, but the boys had an attention span of probably under 30 seconds. So when I went to instruct them on how to do something, I don't even think I had 30 seconds before the boys just started talking with each other. They just couldn't listen for that long. And I was frustrated for a while until I realized these boys can't help it. They can't, the way I would word it this morning is they couldn't act beyond their level of consciousness. That's kind of where they were at. And so I had to adjust how I taught them and keep them moving and keep it active because they couldn't sit and listen for very long. That's a little light, and there's more serious ones. I used to be a scout leader, and I remember this time we were having a camp out, and as part of our camping experience, we were inducting new boys into the scout pack. And part of what they had to do is they had to say, I believe, the scout motto, which included loving your neighbor as yourself. And I asked this one boy, so if a native person was your neighbor, could you love them? And the boy just immediately, quickly, strongly said, no way, could not love a native person that way, like no way. And this boy is maybe 10 years old. And clearly, this boy was coming from an environment, coming from a home where he had learned this. And there's a good chance if I asked dad or mom, whatever, what their views were, I guess I would have heard something pretty similar. And so that's where his level of consciousness was, and he couldn't act beyond it. So that's a bit of a serious example. And then I remember another example I'd say is I was talking to a friend of mine in Pincher Creek who was from Ireland, and this was a few years ago, and he was talking about how he went back to visit in Northern Ireland, and at that time, and this was not that many years ago, he was walking down a sidewalk, and a window was open, and as he was walking down, a fist of a child tried to punch him outside the window because maybe they thought he was Protestant, and he said how difficult it is to change how people treat each other when the children just pick up that kind of belief or animosity toward people who are different. And it's not the child's fault, because no one can act beyond their level of consciousness, which is, I mean, just to keep looking for examples of that is helpful. If I can say another example, I was on a bicycle trip through the United States many years ago, and I was going through the state of Nevada, and I went into a small town, a small store. Anyway, that's a whole other story. It was a kind of a ghost town, and I wasn't sure the grocery store was open. And I went in, and there was bare shelves, but there were some things, and there was an older lady behind the counter. There was no one else around. There was no one on the streets. I mean, it was like a ghost town. And I didn't have a shirt on because I was cycling, and I just stepped into the store to see if it was open. And so when I saw the lady there, I said, excuse me, lady, is this the grocery store? She says, yes, but you'll have to put a shirt on, which I totally got. So I went outside, sort of smiling to myself, thinking, I don't know how many people you get in a day, but I normally would put a shirt on if I went in a store, so I did. So I went in and I got talking to this lady, and part of that was telling her what I was doing, or she was asking questions, but she couldn't believe that I was cycling without a gun. There's no way that I should be cycling without a gun. And she actually went outside and she zipped open a pouch on my handlebar bag, and she pointed, she said, it's right in here, just carry a gun right in here. It was just so far out of my frame of reference that I would go cycling around with a gun in my handlebar bag, but it certainly wasn't hers. And she sort of talked about she wouldn't go anywhere without packing a gun. It was a different level of consciousness. And it's important because what's the prime cause of things is our level of consciousness. There's cause and effect. And if you really want to change the world, people like Jesus knew, you have to change people's level of consciousness, the cause. If you change it there, then you will get a different effect. There's times in life where we have to go and change the symptoms or the effect because people get hurt and things aren't right. People are living with injustice and a lack of resources and so on. There's a place for that. But that's not where a real change and transformation comes from. It comes from changing the cause, which is our level of consciousness. And this is what Paul was speaking about when he said, people need to live by faith. They need to live by God's Spirit, and they will live differently. And all of creation will feel the difference. But something I want to say today, and I'll say it as fast as I can. Different ways of understanding. So what does it mean to have a different level of consciousness? And one way, and it's an important way, is to think of it as information or awareness at sort of a head level. There's a place for that. And you and I can all think of examples of ways in which we used to live, but once we were educated, we changed our ways. And if I can just say very quickly, I never used to think anything of drinking out of a styrofoam cup until I learned many years ago that styrofoam had CFCs in them, which were hard on the ozone layer, I think it was. And so once I learned that, you'd go to a function and people would have styrofoam and they say, would you like a cup of coffee in the styrofoam cup? So even after they took the CFCs out of styrofoam is still a material that doesn't biodegrade and isn't recyclable. And so still today, when I go to an event that serves things in styrofoam, it's like, I can't do it. I can't, it's like I changed, like, and you know, last year someone lent me a book on not eating meat and the whole consciousness. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I want to read this book. I don't know if I want to become more conscious because it's going to change my life. Learning and educating and information is one way of understanding our consciousness going up. That's important. But there's another way that's deeper in a sense in spirituality that is about transformation. A term comes to my mind about spiritual orientation. We've all heard the term sexual orientation, but if I can just say there's another term called spiritual orientation. Where are we orientated? Where are we rooted? And very simply, we can be rooted in our mind or we can be rooted in our being. We are human beings. A lot of times, most of us are just rooted in our humanness, what that stands for, the surface level, the form of us, our body and our psychology and our upbringing and our conditioning. That's the kind of the humanness of us. And we're not as aware of being rooted in our beingness. And in our mind, we all have an idea about who we are. But if I can say that ultimately, you and I aren't who we think we are. who we think we are is really just surface stuff. And most of it's a story, and most of it is fleeting and fictitious. I could tell you that my name is Brent, as if that's really who I am, but frankly, that's just a sound that my parents associated with me. And you've got a different sound associated with you, but you're not really your name. I could tell you that I'm a minister. That's not who I am. I'm actually not a minister. That's a function I fulfill once in a while, and then I need to let that function go. I tell you, if I related to Sally as a minister, I don't think she'd be all that pleased. It's just a function I have periodically, and then I don't. It's not who I am. There's a lot of ideas I could have about myself, but that's ultimately not who I am. But if I think that's who I am, that could be called ego. An ego is an idea that we have about ourselves. And when people live in this idea, this thought about themselves, that they are this way and so on, then ultimately it's kind of shaky. It's kind of unstable. And because we may have ideas about who we are. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a nurse, I'm a truck driver, I'm a Christian, I'm a Canadian. They're all labels, they're identities, but they're fleeting. But if that's all we know about ourselves, then it's like we built our house on sandy ground. And at some levels, we know it. And so we live with a sense of fear, insecurity, and inadequacy. And we're always afraid that we're not enough. And we look for ways to enhance ourselves. And one of the ways we enhance ourselves is we go, well, I'm different than other people. There's me and then there's others. And I'm some way better, aren't I? Because ego is always looking for ways in which it's superior or inferior. Big question to the ego. How do I compare to others? So, and it's a big field and it's important field, but just moving on, it's different than being rooted in our beingness, our being. We're human beings, and there's sort of an essence to us, more to us than just the thoughts we have about ourselves. And this can be understood very spiritually. Sometimes people use the word being instead of God, because God tends to be an idea people have. And where it's pretty hard to have an idea of being, it's a felt realization. People go to war over their ideas about God, but they don't go to war about their beingness. Saying, I'm more of a being than you, or my being is superior to your being. It's a place where we connect to other beings. And then people like Paul Tillich and others wrote about the ground of our being, which is God. And when we're rooted in our beingness, it's like we're rooted in the depth of our being, our essence. And we live differently. When you live from your ego, you live as a scared little fictitious self. When you live from your beingness, you live rooted, grafted on the vine. You are a branch on the vine in that metaphor. And you don't go through the world as a little needy, scared person. So you live differently with other beings, other creation. Moving along quickly, there's the individual ego that all of us have, but there's also a collective ego. And that's where things get more problematic, because little individual egos can do harm, but collective egos do more harm. So you've probably heard this term, America first. Both on those counts, that's an egoic term. America, which is a fictitious, nationalism is, borders are fictitious. And then first means that, America first, we're first before others. Like, it's a comparative thing. It's a race, it's a contest. So that's a form of an egoic mentality. But if we have the mentality of America first, we can also have other mentalities like wealthy first, white people first, the first comers first. Whoever got here first is first. Men first. Humans first. And in so many ways, when we look at our human mentality, we have a lot of these things. And human first. You know, I just was reading yesterday about when they do meat recalls. And sometimes they have millions of pounds of meat that's recalled because there's a possibility that a human is going to get infected with salmonella or E. coli. And then there's going to be lawsuits. And so millions of pounds of animals who once were alive is thrown into a landfill. And I just want to say, all creation is groaning, waiting for humans to become more enlightened. And when you read stories about oil and mining companies going bankrupt and abandoning their responsibility, if they ever had one, of cleaning up the environment and the tailing ponds that they're leaving behind, and they don't, it's like creation is groaning in labor pains, waiting for humans to adopt the Spirit of God. So it's profound and beautiful what Paul is writing here. And again, if we ever wonder why we're seeking to do what we're doing, being spiritual on a spiritual journey, awakening spiritually, well, it matters, not just us. It matters to the people we live with. It matters to the animals we live with. It matters to the vegetation we live with. And I love when people who are much wiser than I am write about this. They say that, you know, every being can tell your level of consciousness. They can feel it. Vegetation can feel where you're at in your level of consciousness. Animals can feel it. People can feel it. If you're coming from a place of oneness and of peace and working with, animals can feel that, and vegetation can feel that, and people can feel that. They can feel our level of consciousness. And can I just say, I think all of us want to evolve to the place where we give off that energy, that the animals and the vegetation somehow feel that we're with them, not against them. Anyway, it's a beautiful topic, and it's beautiful that Paul wrote about it, and it's beautiful that we get to think about it. Thanks for listening today. So I'm going to take us back to the screen. And I'm going to invite Carolyn and Greg to lead us in our next.
I see a new heaven, I see a new earth, as the old one will pass away, where the fountain of life flows, and with the praise goes to all people who abide in the land. There on the banks of the river, bright and free, healing her fruit, love to bring, and life will be. I see a new heaven, I see a new earth, as the old one will pass away, where the fountain of life flows, and with the praise goes to all
Beautiful, thank you. Irene Turner is going to lead us in our prayer time today. Thank you, Irene. Good morning.
Good morning. The prayers of the people. God Most High, known to ancient peoples as the sky god, the God of the mountaintop, you are majestic beyond words. You are worthy of all praise. God so close, known to mystics throughout the ages as inner light. You are compassionate beyond belief. You are worthy of our obedience and trust, our commitment of each waking moment to your ways. Beyond us, around us, within us, your spirit infuses every creature, and the power for abundant living lies waiting everywhere we look. Trusting in you, we ask you to open up new possibilities for all whom we are concerned. We pray for our families, especially those distant from us. We pray for those in our congregation, for those traveling, and for those whose labor today is difficult, who yearn for rest and recreation. For those troubled in spirit, for those searching for meaning in their life. We pray also for those who are ill and who are suffering chronic health problems. For those in particular, at this time, we offer prayers for those affected by recent pandemic, for frontline workers, doctors, nurses, as well as for those in search of a vaccine. God Most High, God so close, hear our prayer through Christ. Amen.
Such a beautiful prayer, Irene. Thank you. And our last hymn, Like a Healing Stream.
Like a healing stream in a barren desert, spirit water bringing life to dusty earth. God is trickling through our lives as in a dream unfolding, promising revival or rebirth. Like a healing stream. Like a gentle rain on a thirsty garden, spirit water come to nourish shiny seed. God is bubbling through the soil to coax a new creation, yearning for an end to want and need. Like a gentle rain. Like a river strong with a restless current, spirit water rushing on to distant shore. God is carving out a channel in a new direction, calling for an end to hate and war. Like a river strong. Like a mighty sea reaching for horizons, spirit water with a love both deep and wide. God is working in our hearts to shape a new tomorrow. God will always challenge and provide. Like a mighty sea, like a river strong, like a gentle rain, like a healing stream.
Somehow I feel even if we don't sing, we're still singing with you, Carolyn and Greg. And and feeling it inside. So maybe you're making us better singers as we do it with you. So closing our service with these words of blessing and benediction. Transformation is possible. Shifting from the surface to the depth, shifting from the mind to being, shifting from the fictitious to the real. When we are a branch cut off from the vine, we wither. When we are a branch connected to the vine, we flourish. All creation is waiting for humans to become enlightened, which is simply our felt oneness with being, with God. Then we are okay. Then we have enough. Then we will live on this planet in a healthy way. May it be so. Amen.